I'm Girish Menon, there. And probably trying to talk about the scientific contribution of ancient India. I hope എത്ര പേർക്ക് ഇതിനകത്ത് മലയാളത്തിൽ പറഞ്ഞാൽ മനസ്സിലാവും? എല്ലാവർക്കും മനസ്സിലാവും? Not you? So should I be using more English or Malayalam? What? Oh, so for the recording in English. Okay, great. Let me try. Okay, English would be good then. I'll try that. Okay, fine. So, okay, you saw this subject, ancient Bharat and the scientific contribution. What is your expectation out of this? Do you have any expectations out of this? Yeah.
It might as well talk about like England rule, like.
Okay, that's your expectation. Fine. Anybody else?
About like I don't know, mathematics and science.
Mathematics and science. Okay, fine. So you think that we had only mathematics and science that was there before? Okay. Sorry. History. Oh, a bit of history. Yes.
Ayurvedic medicine.
Ayurvedic medicines. Okay, so you got bit of an idea. You have any ideas about what's going to happen in the next slides? You had some idea?
The scriptures.
Great, probably, yeah. So let me ask you this question. So how ancient do you think that the Indians are?
Very old.
How old?
50,000.
Do you have a clue of what 50,000 year old means? Oh, okay, so let me ask you this question a different way. How many of you know evolution? What's human evolution? When did man originate in the world? Huh?
South Africa.
From South Africa? Yeah, south of Africa, probably, yeah.
From Pangea,
Sorry?
the supercontinent.
Yeah, the Pangea, that time that never happened. The humans were not there. No, nothing like that. Okay, let me give you the answer. So it's the research, the latest research. Okay, let's be serious now. So the latest research shows that after the humans came from the monkeys, they evolved from the monkeys. It happened in Africa, and there is a theory which is called as the out of Africa route. Okay, so the humans came out of Africa, and then they started to move into the rest of the world, and they populated the rest of the world. And if you want to see, the timeline says 150,000 years to 200,000 years. Okay, that's when approximately this evolution started, and the people started to move and evolve out of Africa. Now, if you look at this is the latest research which is collaborated with National Geographic and IBM, the tech giant. You can clearly see that these are the areas wherein humans originated or evolved out of the so-called monkeys, and then they started to flow into the Arabian Peninsula and then on to India. So the first Indians are that old. Okay, and these are the first Indians who came and then who got settled in the Indian mainland. Those were the first Indians, and the rest of the world was populated from here. Okay, so we have got, when we are talking about ancient India, the history of ancient India, we are talking that old a time. Okay, fine. So how many of you knew this before? No one knew? Oh, you knew this before? Yeah, have you seen? Okay, so now before getting into Indus Valley civilization, which you probably would have heard before, okay, there is a lot of scientific history about how the ancients were, what did they do, and lots of studies happened, especially with the genome study, with the gene study, right, DNA and stuff. With the studies, we have very less or limited data, which actually gives us real good data between the time that the ancient Indians were and when we really got some idea about the Indus Valley civilization. Okay, now we have got real good data from about 7,000 years BC. That's when the first Indian settlement of the Indus Valley civilization was found, and then those guys were doing some sort of an agriculture. That's how it starts. So agriculture was found in the Harappan civilization that you can see now. So now you could see other civilizations also in the same time period that we talked about, right? And what could be the difference that you could see with comparing all those 3 or 4? Yeah?
The Indian civilization was like the biggest
Yes, because in terms of what?
area populated.
Yes, area populated and the number of people inhabited at that time. And incidentally, they were the most advanced during that time. Okay, we'll get into the details of that, but then, yeah, it's very obvious that the people there, the size of that civilization was the biggest at that time, right? And then to just zoom in to what that area, that pinkish bluish area, the violet, something like that area looks like is, so there were several cities that were discovered during that time, right? And majority of them were found in Mohenjo-daro. Then there is Harappa, right? I don't know whether you heard those names before. Then there is something called as Rakhigarhi, and there is Megar. So this Megar area is the place where I told you about. There are ruins from there which were found about 7,000 years old, and those guys were the first guys to do agriculture. There are other theories that show that agriculture came in from Iran onto India, but then the latest studies show that Indians were indigenous in doing agriculture. They developed their own agricultural techniques for the first time. Okay, now moving on. I don't know how many of you would be interested in this, but then the latest studies are here. If you want to go and then probably read more about this, you could do that. But the latest DNA studies actually shows, which was excavated from the Rakhigarhi area that I showed you earlier, is that there is something called as an Aryan invasion theory and all, which some of you might know. And if you are interested, you could go, but then I'm not going to get into the details of this at this point in time. Okay, I can tell you maybe offline, maybe after the class, if you're interested, any of you. Okay, now getting into some facts about the Indus Valley civilization. Before I start this, you already know. Does anyone know anything about Indus Valley civilization before? Have you heard this civilization? What did they did? No.
I think they were the first civilization to have advanced sewage plants and things.
Oh yes, that's one. Yes.
Yeah.
What else?
And architecture.
And now we have got nothing, no toilets. Yeah, that's a different thing. But yeah. Anything else?
There was weren't they the first to have like a council or some sort of?
Council?
No, as in a government or sort of.
Not really. So there were. that's a different story altogether. They didn't even find any remains of warfare or any government. They didn't find even any remains of any kings or rulers there. So that's a different story. We'll take that differently. But then, yeah. Anything else? Anything else that you already know? Otherwise, I'll just probably move on. Okay. So you saw that was the biggest, the largest of that, and then the population was over 5 million, with over 1,056 identified cities. There might have been more, right? This is identified for now. So if you look at it, they had the first planned cities. So this map kind of a thing, which will actually show you how planned they were in doing the cities. And then it is found out that they built cities over and over again on top of one another. And then every time they did the same way or in a particular ratio always. So they knew how to build cities and how they wanted to plan out cities, right? So that's one of the important things. Yes, they were having the best wastewater disposal systems and water management systems, right? And that was years before Romans did the aqueducts, if you have learned in your history. That's what you learn in your history, right? Roman civilization, Greek civilization, it's different. But we did that years before, yeah? Complex water management system for the dry seasons, right? They stored water like in our dams and all that we do today. They used to do that earlier, and then they used it whenever they wanted in the dry seasons. This I already told you. This was about 700 BCE, where they really did agriculture. The techniques of agriculture was developed at that time. There were 2-storied and 3-storied buildings at that time, right? They used to build that. And they had the luxury of attached bathrooms with flush toilets. This is what you can see. These are the toilets in there. Flush toilets. There were dustbins across streets. Did you know that? There were many ports that they built, and then they had a lot of trade with the rest of the world at that time, right? Then coming to the technological advancements, this is something that I think probably one of the speakers earlier were telling you about buttons and things which happened. This is the time period that in which they initially found out those kinds of things. Metallurgy was the first thing. They knew a lot of types of metals, right? Copper, tin, bronze, and then they used to export that at that time. You have to imagine this happened at a time period of about 7000 BC to about 1500 BC, right? That's the time that we are talking about. Most precise instruments humanity had at that time. So they were the first to actually invent the weighing machine, right? And then they even had things to find out the purity of gold. They had instruments to do that because they were using and trading that, and they wanted to have such fine tools to do that, right? They were the first dentists. They used to drill decayed tooth out. They had typical techniques to do that. They were the first dentists in the world. Right? They used cotton, right, for the first time. They domesticated that, they cultivated, and they used cotton at that time. First buttons, but obviously they didn't use it for the fastening thing, right? They didn't use it for that. They used it as an ornamental thing, just like the belt buckle kind of things that we use nowadays. They used it as an ornamental piece, right? They used the oldest signboards. That was one of the good findings that they did. In some of the areas that you enter the city, they had big signboards which showed what that city was intended to and where they were going and things like that. They were fond of games, especially dice games. And then later we developed games like chess, and that all, we'll come back to that later. We'll know what types of games that ancient Indians were really fond of. They're advanced in art and craft, and then they exported art and craft. Okay, so it's not like they just made something out. They didn't just paint it out. They actually made and exported it to other civilizations of the world as well, right? And you can see that one there. People say that once that particular lady, the dancing lady, was excavated for the first time, historians were really puzzled as to why exactly or how exactly these guys made that thousands of years before the Greek, because the Greek was supposed to be doing the finest of artistry at that time, right? And people were really confused on how this could be done by the olden guys. Okay? The only problem with the Indus Valley civilization so far is, how many of you know Rosetta Stone? Oh, what was it for? Okay, let him answer that, yeah. What was that used for, yeah?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Probably deciphered.
Yeah, but no, Rosetta Stone was used for deciphering. That's what I meant to say, right? But that was not for the Indus civilization. It was for the Egyptian civilization. So the hieroglyphics, whatever they found out, was actually the deciphering of that started with the Rosetta Stone, right? We couldn't find a Rosetta Stone yet for the Indus script, and maybe when you grow up, and then maybe one of the research that could be that you could find the Rosetta Stone for, or probably you could decipher this language and then probably find out the rest of the what the Harappans really did, right? The latest research I can tell you, there is a project within the AI firms, which they are doing an AI project to basically decipher with AI techniques. That's what is happening. That's the latest. But they are not yet completely successful in that. Now, there is the ancient people. They did a lot of things. They did art. They did a lot of these scientific advancements. What did they talk? How did they communicate? Any idea what was the language at that time?
I'm not sure, but is it Sanskrit?
No. Sanskrit came long after, but yes, that's one of the languages that was used very old. But then there is Prakrit was used as mostly the conversational language, and Sanskrit was basically the literary language, like Latin was used at some certain point of time. Okay, but yes, there was a time in the Indian history, because we are that old a set of people, there was no language at all. The way that they communicated was through sounds, right? So, how many of you think that all the sounds human produce can be written down? Anything can be written down?
Maybe.
But just try. Can anyone tell me any sound that cannot be written down? Yeah? No, but you can write it as ERR and all, right? Sometimes you see that, right?
Water droplets.
Huh?
Water droplets.
Sorry?
Water droplets. You just write water.
Yeah, maybe that. Maybe that. What about? Can you write that down? You can't. So most of the sound that you find in nature cannot be written down. It cannot be expressed in any sort of language, right? So the same problem was there with the Indus guys also. They learned everything from the nature, right? So they hear birds singing, they hear cows probably mooing, and lots of things from the nature, and then they themselves were making sounds, and then they didn't know how to express that, but they had a lot of knowledge that they wanted to pass to several generations. So oral tradition is the way that they choose to actually move that around, right? So let me take you to, before explaining that, there is a BBC documentary about India, right, which was done by Michael Wood. I don't know how many of you saw this, about the story of India. Okay, it's 2012, 2013 time, slightly older one. But he actually talks about this particular aspect of oral tradition in that. So what he says is, I've just done the quoting of that. So you can see those guys actually sitting in there. Nobody's writing; they are all listening, right? And then what they listen is taken from father to son and just goes on, right? That's what the oral tradition is, right? There might be things that they could write down later, but then there are also things that they were not able to express in written words, right? Especially in Kerala. Okay? There were a certain ancient clan of Brahmins who still lives in Kerala, who practice rituals, and they are ritual specialists, right? For centuries, these chanting or mantras, some of them, they don't even know what the meaning is, right? So it was just passed down from father to son and just goes on in the family. Exact in every sound. So the sound was very important in that. I don't know how many of you heard the chanting that happens in the yaga or things which happens in Kerala sometimes, 12 years once. I don't know how you've heard. I can send you some videos that can make you hear that sounds, okay? It's very, very peculiar, unique, weird sometimes, okay? But some of the mantras are in no known language, okay? Only recently, outsiders are allowed to come in and then do the recording. And then it was done probably later, was in 2003, 2004 times, when there was a yaga that was done in Kerala. The guys from Europe and the US, they came and recorded the sounds, and then they tried to study what they actually meant. So when they actually studied the sound, to their amazement, they discovered that the whole tracks of rituals were sounds that followed rules and patterns. There were a lot of rules and patterns to the sound, but then there was no meaning to it, okay? And when they really did more further analysis into that, they tried to see what could be paralleled with these kinds of sounds. They tried music, because music is supposed to be the oldest of human generated sounds. They didn't find that also as any equivalent to these sounds. The only thing, the nearest analog that came from the animal kingdom, it was actually bird sound. They were reproducing birds' sounds, and then it was carried over from generation to generation with exactly the same kind of sounds. So our culture goes that far into history, from where people actually lived along with nature. And the good thing with the oral tradition is that it is carried forward just as it was when it was originated till now, right? And these sounds are perhaps tens of thousands of years old, and before the human speech itself, right? And it is carried forward just like that. So, like I said, some of these are unprintable. You cannot really do any printing now also. And this oral tradition is still alive in Kerala. It was alive in the whole of India at one point in time. But as you know, in Kerala, it actually comes to the far end in the south. Due to the rest of the cultural invasions and the cultural mixing up of North India, most of these things actually now you can find it probably in the far south. So this kind of oral tradition is still practiced in Kerala. If you're interested, you can go and then do some research about how it sounds. It will be really good to hear the bird songs in those chantings, right? I don't know. How many of you are interested? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, just few more things. It is not only, we are not telling that India was so great and it was only done in India. It is not. Oral tradition was something that was found across the world, right? And several traditions had this oral kind of transferring the knowledge. They used fables, proverbs and songs and all they used to carry forward. But then India is the only tradition wherein we actually carry forward knowledge, right? When you say knowledge, the knowledge of the ancient periods, right? What technology and the tools did the ancients know, their social behavior, their cultural behavior and stuff like that. And it was carried forward without any loss, right? And how many of you know about Vedas? What is it, Vedas? What does it mean? What does the sound, the meaning of the word Veda is? What is it? Scripts, okay. Anyone else?
Does it mean knowledge?
Yes, it just means knowledge. That's it. Okay. I think I showed him this PPT before. No. So the knowledge that what I'm talking about is the oral tradition did carry forward knowledge, right? And then the name of that is nothing but Vedas. So when you hear Vedas, don't think that it is some sort of religious thing which is standard for getting money or good life and things like that to please the gods. Actually not. There is a factor to it. There was a society who was religious at that time. They had to do that kind of stuff also. But then it is not really only that. It's not only religious. There are a lot of different other things that Vedas actually had, and they took it further. Now, you know there are 4 Vedas. Rig Veda is a book of mantra. Mantra means it is spells or chantings and things like that. But then it had meanings, okay? So if you really look at it, Rig Veda is the oldest of that. Those are inspired songs or hymns. Again, oral tradition, right? It was written down later, probably 1,500 years before, but it just was carried forward orally, probably 10,000 years before, right? No one could actually find out how old it was. But Rig Veda was the first one. That's something which you are sure about. Some guys say it can be as early as 12,000 BC to about 4,000 BC, but then it was written down. Just sure that one of the copies that we've got was around 1,500. So if you really search for it, you will probably find the 1,500 BC story, right? The knowledge in Rig Veda is nothing but the social, religious, political, and economic background of the Rig Vedic civilization. So if you want to read and to know what their knowledge was, it is there. So most of these the starting point of most of our scientific achievements, it started from Rig Veda, and then it was there already. If you read that, you get a hang of that. The next one is the Yajur Veda, which is just for ritual. So it's a handbook for the priests. So you have seen priests, they do mantra, this and all. It's a handbook for them. The Yajur Veda had lots of hymns. They used to practice on a daily basis, and then they did that. So it's sacrificial acts and stuff like that, right? Then there is Samaveda. Samaveda is a book of song. So Samaveda does not have anything new in that. Samaveda just has the Rig Veda in a very short form. But then that is when. So how many of you have heard Veda chanting? Yeah, you have heard Veda chanting. How good it is? How monotonous is it? It is not very monotonous. It is not. It's very interesting to sing continuously those many chants in the same way? No? Now have you tried to sing any chants or mantras? How do they do that?
It's got a tune.
Da 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 da, like that you can sing, or da 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 you can sing, right? So what happened actually was this: in the Rigvedic times, people used to monotonously do the recitation, and then when they became the age of Samaveda, they actually wondered, what am I doing? I should make some changes in that. And then the first time what they used to sing was they used to start making notes out of it, da 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 da. So 3 songs, 3 sets of sounds, right? Ni sa ri sa ni sa ri, something like that. So then they started to know what is music. Samaveda is something that actually started with the Indian classical music. That is when people started to realize that the human voice could be toned in different ways, right? They got bored about singing it in the same kind of tone over and over again, right? And that is why it is called the Book of Songs, right? It is a collection of melodies. It is nothing new from the Rig Veda, but then it is just that it is melodically done. That's it, okay? Then, coming to Atharva Veda, this is something which you already might be familiar with, black magic. The so-called black magic of that time, people wanted to do stuff with just by spelling something, doing some mantra. They thought everything will happen just like spelling some mantra, right? So they tried that. They tried mixing a lot of stuff and see what happens, right? That's what magic does nowadays, right? So there were a lot of things which is written in Atharva Veda which talks about that, but that's not only the thing. So Atharva Veda was written in a very simplistic language, not like the kind of Sanskrit that was used in the before Rigvedic times, right? It was more simplistic in that, and it gives a clearer picture of the Vedic society, right? This also gives you the history and sociology of that time. Okay. Then, just run through this. Don't know. You probably might not be interested in these. Some Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads were part of each of those. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into more history. So before that, let's get into something political now. How many of you have heard about Eurocentrism? What is it? You don't know. It's just that people thought everything that is good came from Europe. Have you thought that before?
Yeah.
Anything good, right? Any new discoveries, anything like maths. Oh, fine. Oh, Greek scientists found that out, right? Max algebra. Oh, Greek found the algebra. No, right? That is what is Eurocentrism. It started off with colonization. Okay, so whenever the British started, the Europeans started colonization. That is when the Eurocentrism started. And this is the worldview that is biased towards European civilization. Okay, this is one of the major problems which actually made us suffer from not knowing what the indigenous Indians really found out at one point in time. They thought the world's intelligence was all around in Europe, right? And it actually is part of the Greek philosophy that everything originated, right? Everything other than non-European countries was severely neglected. Wrongly attributed to European scientists. Many of the mathematical theorems that you see were probably discovered by an Indian scientist, but then you will know it as a Newtonian philosophy or a Newtonian theory, right? Especially with the Indian contribution, it is very apparent. Now, let me get into this particular thing. So, the Eurocentric guys always thought that knowledge originated in Greece, right? The Greek civilization. Then, through the Dark Ages, they found it out. The Europeans found that, okay, the Greek did a lot of things. And then they accepted it into the European culture. And then during the Renaissance period, I don't know how many of you know this part of as part of your history studies. Any of you learned that? These kinds of things? No? No one knew about this? Okay, fine. So if you when you start learning about more science, you will start to hear about more Greek scientists, and then it actually originated from Greece and all. It will be never told to you. You could see that there is this Greek influence all over. But actually, what was happening at that time was this: India, Babylonia, and China were mostly having these discoveries. They were already sharing a lot of knowledge across. Some of this went into the Arab Empire, and then from there into Spain and Egypt. Okay? This is how the kind of knowledge that actually spread. We are not saying that the Greek didn't do anything, but then there were some of the great discoveries from the Greek and the Romans. But then the contributions of India was also not very much less. In fact, there were a lot of different contributions of Indians that really happened thousands of years before even the Greeks started to think about that. Okay, it's just to have a thought in your mind that when you start learning, don't always think that okay, this might be the road that it came from. So just have a thought that okay, fine, I have heard it differently. Why can't come from a different place, right? You know about Ayurveda? What is it? Yeah?
It's knowledge on life.
All what?
Is it something to do with your body?
Ayurveda? Anyone else? Yeah, you know Ayurveda. Yes. Don't read that out. You should know what that is.
It's like about medicine.
Yeah, it's an older tradition of medicines that evolved from nature. Okay. So Ayurveda existed even from the Indus Valley times. Okay, so that's one thing, and it significantly developed over the Vedic and then the later Buddhist and Jain influence. Yeah.
Technically, I was right.
Technically, you said it was what? You didn't say anything, did you? It is?
What health?
The health one. Okay, fine. So what is the difference between Ayurveda and yoga then? Yoga is health as well, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between Ayurveda and yoga? So let's come to yoga now. Who knows what is yoga then? Exercise?
No.
Surya Namaskar?
Yoga is basically like keeping your mental status healthy and your physical status healthy.
Great. Yeah, okay, yeah, good. Ayurveda is a medical branch, right? Where it treats specific diseases, right? Hello, namaste. It treats diseases, right? Yoga is actually a discipline, a physical discipline, right? Which has been proponed by the Indians. Yoga Sutras. Okay, I think you heard this earlier. So, how old is the first university? Could be. And which is the first university in the world? Which is the first university in the world?
In India.
Huh? That is not. You want to share something? Yeah, okay. So this is what it is. Taksha Shila. What is it? Yeah.
Oh, with his bald head.
Oh, great. How many of you said? Oh, you. Okay. Okay, and there was another famous university in India. What do you remember what the name of that university is? The Cambridge, yeah.
Wait, is the one?
Oxford. It's like, it starts with N, I know that.
Yeah.
Like
What was the question?
It's Nandan, wasn't it?
Nalanda. Okay.
All empty.
Okay. Plastic surgery, anyone knew that we did the first plastic surgery?
Yeah.
Okay, you knew that. Probably someone already told you that.
Anesthetic as well.
So, do you know what is a cataract surgery? A cataract surgery, which is a surgery done to your eyes, okay? That's it, that's what you need to know. It's a surgery done to the eyes, okay? Plastic surgery was mostly done by this guy called Sushruta for creating nose reconstruction, okay? Recreating nose. Because you know what? You know what? There was a time in which the kings used to punish by cutting off the nose, right? There were some punishments which is like cutting off the nose, especially when you're caught as a prisoner of war, right? They used to cut the nose, right? And then these guys used to come and then they had to reconstruct this. The nose at that time, it is called rhinoplasty, right? The Sushruta did the first rhinoplasty and also cataract surgery is part of his initial days, okay? So, and interestingly, okay, hope you're reading that, right? Okay, and interestingly, in Italy, there were two families of physicians who used Sushruta's own techniques of rhinoplasty to reconstruct nose, right? These two guys. Greek philosophers also, they learned this technique from us, and then they consulted our physicians, and then they started to take this away, probably started to have the plastic surgery techniques learned from us as well. It was also introduced from here to China. Then there is mathematics. How many of you know Pythagoras theorem? All of you. Oh, that's great. How many of you know that Pythagoras was not the guy who how many of you know that theorem was independently found by a lot of different civilizations, including India? But then Indians found the Pythagoras theorem, the so-called theorem, in the Vedic times itself. Sulba Sutra was one of the texts which actually was part of the Vedic system itself, and then Pythagoras theorem was part of that, or early forms of the Pythagoras theorem. How many of you know Pythagoras triplets? There you go. I got you there. You don't know Pythagoras triplets. Those guys knew it, okay? So you know that they have the right angle triangle having three sides, and there could be in the ratio 3, 4, 5. That's a triplet. Okay, there can be a lot of different triplets like that, right? What? Trigonometry comes later. I'll come to that. But that's where it starts from. Okay, from geometry into trigonometry. Okay, now the next thing is about grammar. So now by this time Sanskrit originated, and then it required a systematic grammar text to be created for that, right? And Panini, how many of you know Panini? No, Panini. Panini, right? He is supposed to be the father of linguistics, okay? And this is something very interesting. Two of his interesting contributions to that field is that he invented the first formal system, the world's first formal system. I don't know how many of you know theorems and postulates. Not getting into that, sorry. And also there is something called as a Panini-Backus normal form, which is used for in computer languages. You know that? Did you know that? Oh, okay, great. So that's called the Backus normal form. Probably you heard Backus normal form, right?
Do you know what syntax means?
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We don't have much time, so I'll probably move on, right? Concept of atom? In the Greeks, it came around 500 BC, but then we started to look at the minutest parts of an atom from at least 800 BC, and then there were a lot of different schools which actually did a lot of research on what could be the finest or the basic particle or a matter of which all the matter is made up of, right? So it was partly philosophical and partly scientific. So most of the people, important one in that is Kanada, who is one of the guys who did that. Anyone saw this?
Yeah.
Seen this? What is this about? Oh yeah, so we did the first diamond mining, right? And we were the only diamond miners till the 1700s. Okay. Yeah. There was no diamond outside India for a long time, very long time, until Brazil started to mine that. How many of you know about steel
Yeah.
and how it looks like? How many of you know about samurai steel?
Yes.
Oh, great. But you don't know about this steel, Indian steel.
Woods.
Yes. What? Woods. Yeah. Woods, right? Oh yeah, so that is something called as crucible method, right? That they created it. Okay, one important thing is, one interesting thing is that the Chera dynasty of South India really did the finest steel in the world at that time, high carbon steel, right? And it was so feared that even the British, after the Mysorean War, they were more interested in collecting the swords from Tipu Sultan's army than really doing the war, any other things like gold and all. So they were more interested in collecting the swords because it is more sought after. And this is also called as Damascus steel, which finally went. How many of you heard about the sword of Damocles? At least from any stories that you heard? Do you know about Tipu Sultan's sword? Which is there in the London, no? Why is it so famous? It is because it's the same steel, high carbon steel, right? That's why it is most prized after. I'll just stop here. I thought I'll take a break, but then by the looks of it, I've got only 10 minutes. Yeah, sorry?
You can take 10 more minutes as much.
Oh, fine, great, okay. I'll probably just give them some any questions at this time, because I have to get into one more topic about maths and there is a lot.
Do you know how you said like at the start the civilization, the Indus civilization was like really advanced and like sewage system and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, how come like none of that's left today?
Yeah, so you have to ask that question yourself. What happened during the ages, right? So even I'll probably move on and then maybe take you through that. So when you talk about the contribution of science at a certain period in time after the Vedic period, what happened was they started invasions from the outside. Initially it was the Mongols that used to come in, the Huns and the Mongols that used to come at that time. So if you look at the scientific contributions of that time of India, the contributions actually came down. And then it is only after the Gupta dynasty came in with the the Vikramaditya, the Chandragupta II. So the Gupta dynasty actually brought the political stability back to India. And then that is when you will see Aryabhatta and then people who started to make the scientific advancements again in India. And then once that was done, during the later period when the Arabs started to come in, so whenever there was a political turmoil in the country, right, that is when when the peace is lost. That is when the technological advancements and the arts and crafts and the society really goes into a darker period, right? So whenever there was it happened to India, that's when everything lost. And you know probably by the British rule, the GDP that somebody talked about in there from 26% to less than 2%, right? So that's when we were systematically looted, and then we are here without even proper toilets at this point in time, where we had the flush toilets at one point in time in the history, right? So it's partly us to blame, and partly there is invasions. We couldn't stop that, right? We were not united when it was really required. So probably that's the reason. Maybe I'll run through this. I don't know. I have enough time to take you through all these things, right? I don't know why mathematics really originate. What was the requirement of mathematics? Have you seen these kinds of things? They used to actually make fire altars like this, which actually had so two main contributions of Indians are in mathematics and in in astronomy. So those are the two main areas. Scientific physics and chemistry, and then metallurgy and rest of things are there, but then this was the main contribution that we could do. So making this particular piece that required the knowledge of how to make triangles, rectangles, trapezius, squares and circles. So incidentally, they had to really invent Pythagoras theorem. They had to do pi estimations for circles, right? They had to do addition, subtractions, all the arithmetical operations. They had to do zero, right? They had to do for denoting. So I'll come back to the decimal system in a while, but prime numbers was something that they found. Fractions and algebra also evolved out of the Vedic literature later, right? People, Arab scholars all got this from India, because there was a lot of trade relations between India and Arabia at that time, and then Arab scholars really learned the mathematical techniques from India at that time. The Ganita, which is a Sanskrit word, literally means science of calculation, right? That's where the arithmetic really originated from. Sequences, I don't know how many of you know about sequences that originated in India. The decimal number system, this is how it originated, okay? It started from here, this is the oldest one, and then the Hindu thing, if you see 0, 1, 2, 3, it's almost the same. Then the Arabs took it, Arabs wrote it like that. Medieval times it was written like that, and this is the modern system, right? So this is how it really evolved into the 0, 1, 2, 3 that you write down, which is called the base 10, or the decimal system that we know today, right? Okay, 0, I'll probably run through that. 0, by the way, 0 is actually, if you really look at it, Indians discovered 0, yeah, fine, but it is just not like that. The Babylonians were first to use a space for nothingness. So every culture wanted to express that in a particular way. The Babylonians actually used a space for doing that. Indians are the first to actually invent a symbol for that, and then use it at the time, and use it for arithmetic purposes. And that's why the importance of Indians are in that, okay? And 0 was first found in the Bakshali manuscripts, which you probably can go and then read more about that. I'm not going into details about that. Other things which, other than 0 in the same document, these are the things that you'll probably find. I don't know how many of you know about all these things. I don't know how to take you through that. At this point, there's a lot of knowledge in there, right? Anybody of you are interested, you probably can go in. So if you really look at it, mathematicians today, I don't know how much it has changed over the years, but then today they still argue where it began, whether it is in Greece or Arabia, but then never they have talked about Indian. It's been always kept below a certain point when it comes to contributions of India. Like I told you, there was a dark period, and then it actually, during that time, and then it actually came out when the Gupta dynasty started. The political stability actually brought the things again. But still, at that time, there was writing that was happening from oral tradition into writing that happened during that time. And one of the things which you can see in the Surya Siddhanta is sine function, trigonometry. Somebody talked about trigonometry here. That's when it all started to start from, okay? That's a list of mathematicians India had, starting from 800 BC to 17th century. Right? So if you look at it, BC, here there is a gap. This is where the political problems happened. And then you come here also there is a small gap. And if you really look at it, all these mathematicians from here down are from Kerala. Because at that time, most of the knowledge which was there in the ancient North India was lost, and then it actually had to just be there in only one place, and that's in Kerala. That is why there is something called as Kerala School of Mathematics. How many of you know about that Kerala School of Mathematics? She knows that. Oh yeah, you spoke of that. Oh great, okay. So before that, let me take you through two of them, Aryabhatta one, and then probably Bhaskara, or maybe Brahmagupta. So just quickly go through that. So he had a lot of things in his time, and then he did inversion, cube roots, squaring, square root. How many of you know that? Have you heard at least? Yeah, you heard. Series, have you heard about arithmetic series?
Yeah.
Okay, great, okay. Fine. Infinite series?
No.
Yeah.
Ah, great. Geometric progressions and things like that. Okay, great. Okay, fine. So you know about series, right? So the initial thoughts of that, all those happened during that time. So you can also see the time that I'm talking about, right? Then the first time approximation of pi. Lot of different cultures have also tried to find out the value of pi, but then the first approximation, very accurate approximation, that was done by this guy in India. Okay, it's not the first time, but then one of the guys. Brahmagupta also did his part, right? So some of them are like Pell's equation. I don't know if you've learned that, but then it's actually Brahmagupta equation. It's not Pell's equation. He did it thousands of years before that, right? So, but it's still called Pell's equation. No one has changed it. Quadratic equations. He started that as well. So probably you would have heard quadratic equations, right? Now Kerala school, probably she talked about that earlier, but you would not have heard that. Yes, this is the time that I'm talking about, 14 to 16. Madhava was the main guy in there. Madhava, who was in Thrissur, almost close to Thrissur. He is supposed to have lived there, but none of the works of him are found. The only traces of his works were found by the Shishyas who had written about that is what is found, right? So none of the authentic works directly by him is not found. But still, with that itself, there are significant work that he has done on infinite series. So that most of these that you see here, right, they literally renamed back with the Madhava to give him some kind of a credit, right? Some of them, not all, but then there are a lot of other things that still deserves credit to Madhava, which is clearly not done. But then if you look at it, there is Madhava series, then there is Madhava Grigori series, then Taylor series, Leibniz Grigori Madhava series. There are a lot of different series that you might learn later. That's probably attributed to him and not to these guys who found it later, maybe independently. But then there are theories that suggest that it probably could have transmitted via the Arabic and later Kerala, because Kerala had a lot of maritime relationship with Arabia, Europe, with China and all. And then it is also told that it might have crossed through. There is a theory that says that it crossed through, all these knowledge would have crossed through Arabia into Europe. But no research has not been done, much research has not gone into that. Probably that's something that you could maybe do some research and try to find in your time. Would know this.
Yeah.
Don't want to take much time of yours, but there is a lot of information there. Motions of the solar system, yes, we did know. Eclipse, didn't you know? How many of you know eclipse was initially explained by us? No one knew that. Oh, great. Okay, fine. Eclipse, I mean, it's a beautiful Sanskrit verse, 2 lines, which clearly shows that when the shadow falls into one another, it creates the eclipse, right? So it's very clearly explained in there. And accurate measurements of the hours in a day and how many days in a year. It's very close. See, it's short by 41 seconds, and the other one very short. This is okay. So that's when somebody actually took a calculation of how much of error that the Indian calculations did for the time of eclipse were very close. Also the periods of the day and then the year, very close errors, right? It was done thousands of years ago, and with the modern tools, we were able to find very negligible sort of errors in those calculations, right? How did they do that? There are tools, okay? It's not like they sat and then did that and get God. No, there are tools. You should go read about that to understand what are the kind of tools that they did. If we were able to find a telescope, we would have actually done more than this. But that was something that really stopped us from going further into the astronomical space of scientific exploration at that time, okay? The rest, whatever we could do, we did. Heliocentrism, yes, it was the sun and the planets moving around that was suggested very long before. Gravity, there's beautiful stanzas about gravity, both in Upanishads, starting from Upanishads. It's called Bhumi Abhimani, which is in Ayurveda there is a concept of vayus, right? Different vayus in the body. One of the vayu is Bhumi Abhimani, which actually goes down. Says that it is looking for Bhumi, which Bhumi is the earth, which actually pulls it down. It talks about the force from that period onwards, right? And then the circumference of the earth, which is again accurate. Right, the fact is that it was discovered around 5,500 years ago, before even Galileo, Copernicus and all tried to pioneer that in the European astronomy from the Greek side, right? So the Greek influence, Eurocentrism, yes, that's a term that you should always thing. Indian ink. How many of you know? I used Indian ink. Okay, I have used Indian ink. How many of you have heard about that Indian ink? It's a peculiar kind of an ink. It's a peculiar dark color, black color, which actually changes into slight pinkish after so many years. But it preserves it very, very, very nicely. That's something that we indigenously found out, right? Indigo is another one, which is a dye which is used to color clothes. That's also one other thing that we had. Rockets. How many of you know rockets were initially used by the Mysorean Tipu Sultan's force? Oh, you heard that? Oh, great. Okay, fine. It actually created a lot of mess for the Britishers, but yeah, somehow they managed later after they killed them. Shampoo. Yes, I think someone talked about shampoo there, right? Dates back to 1762. Chess, you probably would have heard it before, right?
Yeah.
Chess, Chaturanga, it started from the Gupta dynasty about that time, right? Yeah, and Ludo. How many of you played Ludo? Oh yeah, you know Ludo. 6th century. Snakes and ladders. Snakes and ladders. Yeah. Okay, next is, how many of you know that sugar, the kind of the crystalline sugar that you see now, was done by Indians first time? No? No one knew? Very bad. The Guptas did that. Even, in fact, Sharkara, that is in Malayalam also, it's Sharkara, right? Sharkara actually, it means that, which is later Shakar in Persian, right? Shakar became French sucre and then sugar later. Right? Shakar. Iron Pillar of Delhi, I don't have to tell you that. It still is there without rusting for a long time now. Veterinary science. Did you know that Ashoka was the first guy who erected a hospital for animals in his kingdom? First time. Yeah, there were hospitals for animals at that time, right? So this guy here, Shalihotra, he's supposed to be the first veterinarian in the world. He was a specialist on horses, right? And he wrote something called as Haya Ayurveda. Haya means horse, okay, in Sanskrit. Movable houses, that was also done by us initially, right? And that's it, I'm done. What do you think? Yeah. How many of you are sleepy? Yeah, you were. Would see that. What would you do? I mean, does it make any difference in the knowledge that you had so far, and then something that you heard and something that I tried to show you then? What do you think about it? Who wants to talk? You want to say something about it?
Let him say.
Well, now I know that like that everything wasn't like just started from Europe, and that most things actually had Indian background.
Okay, not most things, but then the things that we talked about, slightly more than that. Yeah.
I got a question. Do you know how you said, like, so we all know that India discovered like all these things, but how come there's still questions about who discovered it? And like,
they have to be research.
Yes, so
they have to be see the problem with that. So I get these questions from long. So the problem with that is there are a lot of manuscripts that are destroyed or lost, right? And then there is the time period that we are talking about is so old that there are very less things that are existing to study. You know that Takshashila and Nalanda were there were a lot of manuscripts that were destroyed. People who came in, the invaders, they destroyed that, right? So yeah.
How do you, if you know the information?
Not me.
Yeah, fine. Wherever you found the information from, surely they can research into that.
Yeah, there is research happening still. You can actually join that, yes.
Yeah, you join.
Sure, yes. You could join as well. Okay, so any other things from this side? Before I invite her to give you a small talk. Anything else? You wanted to ask something? Yeah.
What's your actual job?
Oh, great. Oh, fine. I didn't tell you. I am an AI and cloud architect in IBM. Okay? So that's my job. Okay. That's what I do. And this is my interest. I'm interested in history and in the traditional aspects of India. So I read a lot, and that is why I know all this stuff. Okay. Anything else?